created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Hello, hello, hello. I am so glad to see you again. We are in another episode of this season where we are dissecting, where we are talking in depth around the most famous arias that are the greatest favorites of the publics and of the singers as well, because they know that they will get a huge applause if they happen to do it correctly. There is, of course, you may have noticed as we have made progress, and if you have heard the other episodes, that there is a disadvantage for these arias. Even though one may think that they are very well known, it is usually the opposite. It turns out that the more they are known, the more often they are sung, the more the stranger they seem, the real understanding of the area seems to be falling apart. So you may have discovered it in the other episodes, and I think it's going to be pretty much the same for this one. Of course, you know that we start talking about the composer and things around the opera where it is part of. Of course, we are talking about the great Maestro Puccini, very well known for the heavy, nice but heavy operas that he composed, most of them around the topic talking about love, and it is the case for La Boheme. La Boheme is one of the most represented operas throughout the whole world because every tenor, every soprano wants to sing the key arias of this opera. Of course, the sopranos, the mimis, want to sing the Si mi chiamano Mimi, and the tenors, of course, they want to sing Che gelida manina. Che gelida manina, it's the aria for Rodolfo. One must say one thing that it is very important. It is even it is in the first act. Many people say that it is at the beginning, but it is not truly at that beginning, because around somewhere around 18-20 minutes have already passed. The initial scene where Rodolfo and his friends, the other bohemes, are in their very very small and poor apartment that they can afford to pay, and the moment when he happens to meet Mimi. What is La Boheme about? Maybe it is about, again, a topic of love, but what are the characteristics or what are the things that Maestro Puccini embedded in this opera? Well, one thing that it turns out to be very interesting is that in this case he pictures the relationship between two young people. It is not the case as in Turandot, where there is a princess, Turandot herself, and Calaf, who is a prince. And so the relationship of two people of power, prince and princess, in Turandot. There are situations where it is quite more interesting, as in Manon Lescaut, one a member of the aristocracy, and the other, Manon Lescaut herself. Well, you know, she's a character herself. We talked about that in the seasons Parlons de, Manon Lescaut. We talked about that. So very different characters in Manon Lescaut. You have Madame Butterfly when there is the captain of that comes from one given culture, the American culture, the U.S. Pinkerton, and there is this Japanese girl that we all love, Cho-Cho-san, very very young herself. As for Pinkerton, even though his exact age is not described anywhere, one might believe that he's either in his late 30s or 40s. So the difference of age between Cho-Cho-san and Pinkerton is very big, that difference. But that is not the case going back to La Boheme, where we have two young people. Mimi in one side, Rodolfo on the other hand. But why is it necessary to talk about their youth? It is necessary to talk about their youth because the sound they must communicate in the opera, the spirit that is communicated in the opera is that we used to have, hopefully many of you still have it, that thought of, in a way, innocence and purity, that lack of experience that usually makes us tougher people, but that innocence when you still feel like you're falling in love for someone very rapidly is what is transmitted by Maestro Puccini. In that sense, that gives us a very good hint as on what the color or the sound of the voices must be. So these voices, both Mimi and Rodolfo, must be very candid, if you allow me the expression. In that sense, and we will see it in detail, just give me one more minute. Rodolfo is a poet, a young poet who lives out of his dreams and hopes that we will see shortly. However, as it has come to be so very famous that many tenors like to sing it, we then again fall in the exaggerations and overdoing of everything. Just to call the attention, and maybe you sang a very lousy version of the gelida manina, but since you sang the high C properly, people give you an applause and and everybody's happy. The two parties are happy. But at this point, before we now really start talking about the content of the aria itself, I would like to refer to the phrase that not only they are two young people. Of course, we haven't talked about Rodolfo's friend, Marcello, a baritone, and his girlfriend, Musetta, that take also part of this story. Two other characters that are needed to explain La Boheme. But I wanted to share with you that usually it is better, at least from an aesthetic point of view, when two lyrical voices are the ones going for La Boheme. A beautiful tenor voice, and there are many, many beautiful tenor voices, lyrical tenor voices, there are many, many, many around. A beautiful tenor voice can do it. With a sufficient, at least average technique, he can get away with La Boheme. Not with the interpretation. The interpretation is very, very tricky. And remember that we are talking about Maestro Puccini, who has these very long, melodic, legato lines, phrases that demand that the color of the phrase is homogeneous. That's where the difficulty stands. If you allow me, in a way, in a different style, of course, but in a way, these long legato phrases reminds us somehow of the Bellini, the bel cantista Bellini, of course, Bellini with full of ornaments and the coloratura that is part of the bel canto. Of course, Maestro Puccini is not. He's more known for the verismo, but still his very long legato phrases are a must if the sound of Mimi and Rodolfo is to be conveying what is needed. So enough with the introductory part. Let's start talking about what happens here. So Mimi has come to the apartment. It is known as the Buhardilla, the place where the Bohemians live, Rodolfo and his friends. So Mimi has entered, having as illumination only a candle. She enters there and accidentally, as it is necessary for the plot to develop, the flame extinguishes. So they are kept in dark, and Mimi, who happens to have the key at hand, loses her key, cannot find her key, and so she and Rodolfo start looking for it. But remember that there is a hint in the development of this scene when Rodolfo has seen for the very first time Mimi. He has said that he really loves that, or that he really likes that beautiful girl, and he uses expression because he says que bella bambina, oh what a beautiful girl. So picture yourself, maybe even now or when you were younger, when you were walking on the street, when you entered a party, when you were visiting a friend, And then you notice you are introduced to a beautiful girl or to a person that you really, really like. And inside yourself, you say, wow, I really like her. I really like him. How much I wish he or her would be with me. If we could, and our mind starts dreaming, we start daydreaming, thinking of the many things we would like to do when we have that person to our side. That is exactly the spirit of Mimi and Rodolfo. They are captured by the emotion because Mimi herself has also liked Rodolfo. So we have to understand that Rodolfo is an attractive man and Mimi is a beautiful girl. So two attractive people, young, living on the same building, why not, right? And so when they are looking for the key, then again, accidentally, Rodolfo has touched Mimi's hands. And that's how the opening phrase starts. Que gelida manina means, but your little hands are so cold. They are frozen. For this purpose, remember that La Boheme happens in December in the days of Christmas. So very symbolic that they are meeting in the days of Christmas, of course, being very cold, of course, all of them being very poor. They do not have the minimum necessary to keep themselves warm and safe. So it comes to us at no surprise that Mimi has her hands cold. And the score says, holding Mimi's hands, dolcissimo. Dolcissimo means that with all that tenderness, with all that beautiful color of a lyrical tenor voice, he's going to tell him, Que gelida manina. And you're talking only about the hand, Que gelida manina, because this is usually the first part where the tenor starts overdoing things as if he was singing, as if he was, I don't know, maybe Cavaradossi when he has his first aria and sings to Floria Tosca, Recondita armonia. He's saying, Que gelida manina, and he's not the way he should be doing it. No, it is not out loud. Que gelida mani. No, 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 no. Soft. Dolcissimo. Que gelida manina. Se la lasci riscaldar. And before I forget, most of the aria, keep in mind that it is the two of them alone. The two of them young, the two of them innocent, the two of them daydreaming, and this is a dialogue. Rodolfo has taken Mimi's hands and said, your hands, your beautiful tiny hands are cold. May I warm them for you? In a very kind and innocent and maybe daring gesture says, your hands are cold. Please let me warm them up for you. Cercar che giova, al buio non si trova. Remember that they have been looking for the key that Mimi has accidentally lost in Rodolfo's apartment. So after feeling that her arms are cold and that he has offered to warm them up, he says, well, why looking for the key any longer? It makes no purpose. It's dark. We will never find it. So let's stop looking for it, and maybe let's do something else. And he says, ma per fortuna è una notte di luna, e qui la luna l'abbiamo vicina. But fortunately, you know that it is very dark. We have just mentioned the candle, the light of the candle extinguished, so they can see no longer. But Rodolfo, who is a poet, keep in mind that he's a poet, now sees through the window that the light of the moon arrives. And so he says, Ma per fortuna una notte di luna, e qui la luna l'abbiamo vicina. We are so lucky that the light of the moon gets to us, and the moon is so close that we may call her our neighbor. Here, at the top of the apartments at the Guardilla, we can say that we are so close to the moon. And that, it is sometimes, well, it really depends on the personality of people, but it is very often referred that when two lovers meet together, they dream of having the moon by their side. The moon by their side, it's what Rodolfo says. La luna l'abbiamo vicina. Ah, aspetti signorina, le dirò con due parole. Chi son e che faccio come vivo. Vuole. This part is very important because after having talked about the moon, but he says, but listen, wait a second, little girl. I would like to share with you who I am, what I do, and how I live. Rodolfo, the poet, says there is nothing else I can share with you but words where I describe who I am, what I do, and how I live. Will you allow me to do that? Vuole? And then Mimi, because remember this is a dialogue, Mimi says yes, nodding with her head. And so Rodolfo continues now with the actual aria, because the previous has been pretty much as the introductory part. So who I am? Chi son? Sono un poeta. Che cosa faccio? Scrivo e come vivo. So, chi son? Who am I? Again, going back to piano, sono un poeta. Che cosa faccio? And what do? I write, scrivo. E come vivo? And how do I live? Vivo, which means I barely make my life, meaning I am poor. But in this very short, in these two words, couple of phrases where he has described that he's a poet, that he writes, and he barely makes money to live, he moves on. But it is very important that Maestro Puccini decided to portray Rodolfo as just a poet, a poor poet. Remember that Calaf was a prince. We talked about his ego in that episode, the Prince Calaf, when we talked about other characters such as Pinkerton. Remember that Pinkerton from the US Naval Army. So that was the case of the other characters, but now we have just a poet, which have just a man. And he continues when he says, In povertà mia lieta, sciallo da gran signore, rimedini d'amore per sogni e per chimere e per castelli in aria. Here I must also refer to what I was sharing with you earlier, with these continuous phrases that Maestro Puccini expects them to be legato, with a good homogeneous emission from Rodolfo, perfectly pictured by a lyrical tenor. But also we have to pay attention to the fact that La gelida manina is usually sung in a very monotonous way. Because the tenor is just willing, if he has the high C, he's just looking for the high C to finish it up, because it is somehow a long aria. And if he doesn't have the high C, he's so very afraid of reaching the final part. At the end, very little attention is put in the in-between. And the dynamics of this aria are lovely, because Maestro Puccini has given the tenor many moments along the aria where he has either to increase the volume, either to go rallentando to show a particular state of the message, or he has to go back to piano, meaning that Rodolfo is, having these blasters of emotion, these explosions of emotion that we as young people have, but then again goes back to controlling himself because he's barely knowing Mimi. So it is not an aria in Chenier where he sings out loud most of the time. No, no, no. This is a Rodolfo that is fighting to control himself for the emotion that he has, not only because of his age, but because he's facing a woman that he really likes. So when he goes, Jean lo gran signor, Jean lo gran, when he says, Jean lo gran signore, immediately, signore, he has to go back to quiet. Just to give you an example of what I was just saying, he goes very fast for these notes or for this volume, but immediately back again into being, if not timid, at least being more a controlled one. Sciallo da gran signore, rimedini d'amore, per sogni e per chimere, e per, again we have the example, e per castelli in aria, e per castelli in aria, because the whole phrase is not per castelli in aria. That is not the way it should be done. However, I am pretty sure that many times have we heard that from many tenors, exaggerating the whole phrase. But remember, it has to have these explosions, these very, very momentaneous explosions of emotion, and then go back to being a Rodolfo who is fighting to have his health in control. After having said, in povertà mia lieta, sciallo da gran signore, but in this place where as I was sharing, I am poor, I am still the Lord, I am the one who reigns here, because I have rhymes and hymns of love, per sogni e per chimere, per castellinaria. So those words that make me rich, those words that make me the Lord of this place, those words are words that put together rhymes and hymns where we sing to love, and words for our dreams and for chimere, meaning, of course, chimere, you know that those entities never existed, but they are very often depicted in legends and sometimes in poetry as well. E per castellinaria, because my words in my poems can create those castles in the wind, those castles in the air, and with all those things that I can create, my soul is millionaire. My body may be poor, but my soul is rich, so very rich. L'anima milionaria. With this, so far, Rodolfo has told us a lot about himself. He's not a person who is looking for someone who has money to exit, to live his life of poverty. He's looking for someone with whom he can share these words of love and of castles that can be built in their dreams. That's what Rodolfo has shared us. If you allow me an expression, a very, very beautiful, innocent soul. And now he's sharing or saying Mimi, after having described himself. Now he goes to the part where he says to Mimi, but you, those eyes of yours, have stolen my jewels. Your beautiful eyes have stolen all these things that I have just pictured for you. And this is the part that, by the way, is very lovely, again with the style of the legato of Maestro Puccini. But even though it is with much higher notes, it does not mean that the tenor has to exaggerate it. And if he was Calaf singing Nessun dorma, still in the character of Rodolfo, this innocent young man, that in this very intimate dialogue, and if you have the person by your side, you're not yelling to herself, but you're rather like sharing a secret. Dolor del mio fortiere, ruban tutti i gioielli, due ladri gli occhi belli, v'entrar con voi pur ora, egli miei sogni usati. But let's make a pause there. So far we know that Mimi has stolen the piece of our poet. V'entrar con voi pur ora, egli miei sogni usati. Rodolfo will tell Mimi, remember that this is a very intimate dialogue, so exaggerations, overdoing of anything is not needed. Those eyes of yours, those eyes that have stolen those dreams from me, those dreams that have been stolen from me. Truth is that even though they have been stolen, I will not miss them, because what Rodolfo wants to tell us is that he may have lost those words, those dreams, those creations that he actually does, but in his place he has gotten something even more precious, of course, the eyes of Mimi. And I think it is a very, very beautiful way to put things. I mean, if you were someone to whom somebody you like tells you that he has lost something very precious, but he doesn't miss it because he found the beauty of your eyes, I mean, how would you not fall in love for a guy like this? I mean, he's a poet. He really knows how to make things sound nice. As I also wanted to mention a little about the notes, I have already said that the way Maestro Puccini wrote it is that most of the times when Rodolfo has touched something higher than an F, most of the times an A, or let me see, an A or a La, if you know the name of the notes, from F or Fa to a La or A, whenever it reaches those, Maestro Puccini just makes it for a very, very, very short amount of time, and then sends the tenor go back either barafretando or rallentando or with piano or in any other notation, asking the tenor to hey, but control yourself. Don't throw everything, because that is not Rodolfo. Rodolfo is a young, innocent man in a dialogue, in a very intimate dialogue with a person who is close to him. So no need to yell, tenor, please. That's what basically Maestro Puccini has told us. And there is this part that I mentioned, e qui la luna l'abbiamo vicina, and we moved ahead. And he then talked about this part, being stolen. He is reaching a part where he's expected to sing a little louder, but even though he needs to sing a little louder because you know the high notes, any note for a tenor higher than an F usually sounds very, very loud, because tenors are usually very comfortable with those notes. We also know that la voce di testa, the head voice that is usually known, has the quality. There are physical characteristics in its components that make it sound louder than the medium and bass notes. That's why usually those notes are brilliant and are perceived to be louder in volume. So naturally, the tenor will sound loud when he reaches that part. Talor del mio furore e ruban tutti i gioielli dove ladri gli occhi veli. At starting that part, he seems to be singing out loud, but the tenor should refrain and go back to softer, because we are reaching the part where the part that everybody is expecting. Of course, we are reaching the end of the aria. And what do we have as content in the final part of the aria? After having said that he doesn't care about having been stolen of those words because he has received in its place the beautiful eyes of Mimi, the score gives the tenor two options. Poiché va preso, and each of these syllables is very much marked, and it is also in the partitura with crescendo. Poiché va preso. Of course, not as I am exaggerating. Porque vai preso. Not that much, but I am just emphasizing it so that you notice that next time you listen to a tenor, poiché va preso stanza, until la stanza, that there is a do or a C, a central do for a tenor written, that is where he has two choices. He can immediately for la dolce speranza, and in dolce speranza, do keep an F, do that after, in the final part of that syllable, he will increase from F to G and then go in che, reach an A, dolce, dolce, which is, by the way, it is not the way that tenors usually do it. In one hand, because he has to stop in an A, la dolce speranza. That's the way, that's one of the options. Oppure, as Maestro Puccini has said, we had said that stanza was a central do that is kept, but in the option after having said poiché va preso stanza, immediately the la, in the second option, the la word becomes an F. La, the la, where in the first option it was do, it is la. You increase in one option in dolce, the first syllable, and in the other option the single word la. So las. If you allow me, even if you reach or if you don't reach the high C, I think that it is better or easier for the tenor voice. Of course, it really depends on the style and technique of the tenor, but I think it is much easier to go for a vowel la spe, because a la spe, that is more natural for a tenor voice to be climbing up on the scale of the notes than changing a syllable for another syllable. Dolce, dolce, spera, and then you notice you go from O to E, then again E, and then again A. So there are several syllable changes that the tenor is not willing to do in one of the options, while if he adheres to the high C, he only has to go la, a, increase to G, then spe becomes a la or an A, and then goes and hits the high C. That's why you listen to a tenor, spe. That's what you hear in the tenors do, speranza. Sometimes a tenor may also choose to not wait or reach the A and go immediately for the high C. Of course, I'm not really sure, as long as it sounds nice, because remember that the high C is usually a top note that not all tenors have. So I think that as long as it is done correctly, I see no objection in whether he takes or of not the value of the live previous to the high C. But what I think must be done very, very nicely is after the the transition, spera, speranza. That transition, from my perspective, needs to be very well done, and that could be even more important than the high note, because if the tenor does otherwise, and then loses area, speranza, speranza, it sounds besides not sounding nice, not being very careful in what he does, it looks like I don't care. I just gave my high note, I will wrap up speranza whatever, and it is not a whatever. Remember that Maestro Puccini leaves leaves many notes on the score for the tenor to guide himself, and there is a ligatura here, which means I expect you to sing this whole phrase with homogeneity. So going for the high do, speranza, and then letting the speranza loose is not an option. It has to speranza, and then as important as that phrase, he must wrap up with words in piano and dolcissimo. Orche mi conoscete, parlate voi, parlate chi siete. Then Maestro Puccini announces in pianissimo, double P, vi piace, and it has, I'm not sure how it is said in English, but in Spanish we say Calderón, vi piace, which is a symbol, a notation that tells you can take the time, anytime you want, for that syllable, vi piace dir. So, after I have said that I lost my jewels, and it doesn't matter because it now has been conquered by hope. That's where the high C or the high note is sung in the word hope, because those eyes have brought me hope. And now that you know me, or che mi conoscete, parlate voi, I have already shared what I wanted to share. But how about you? De parlate, chi siete? Please, now, let me know on your side. Who are you? Would you do that, please? Vi piace dir? The dir is a note that extends as long as the tenor has the breath, but also the Maestro Puccini demands the volume to decrease. There is a diminuendo here. So it is not vi piace dir, which is usually what most tenors do. That is not what is written. It is not dir. That is not what is written. It has to decrease. And of course, you have tenors that do those things to perfection, that kind of ornaments. Of course, examples like Giuseppe Di Stefano, who was an expert in filaturas, that way of decreasing the volume at the end of the phrases, and that is what the tenor is expected to do. So la gelida manina does not end in that high C or the la as an optional. It ends with this E in sound, in vowel, and E as the mi, the value of the note, and it has to be decreased. So vi piace dir. That's how it must be wrapped up. So if the tenor you like, or the versions that you like, do most of the stuff that I have shared with you, working on the dynamics, understanding that not everything is out loud, understanding that this is not Andreas Chenier, understanding that after the high C or the la, as the tenor is able to sing, you don't throw away the two syllables of esperanza, and then wraps up with a beautiful diminuendo, with decreasing his sound in the last phrase, then you certainly like the right tenor. Otherwise, it is very likely that you are listening to a tenor who just likes to do acrobatics and pyrotechnics and wants to get an easy applause. But with the very, very fine partitura score that Maestro Puccini wrote for this candid, young, nice guy that is this poet Rodolfo, I really, really think he deserves better. Of course, for the gold members, there is the bonus episode where I will be sharing with you a version of this gelida manina, of course, live, that I really, really, really loved. Thanks everybody for listening, and hope to see you around soon in another dissection of a very well-known aria.
You can follow our channel for the latest updates and more content. Opera We Love Singing, in just one word. Link in the description of the episode.